Imagine uncovering a secret hidden for thousands of years within ancient clay tablets, a secret that speaks not of earthly wars or forgotten kings, but of cosmic catastrophes that echo across the universe. Long before telescopes graced the skies, civilizations gazed upward with wonder, recording celestial events that modern science is only now beginning to understand. Among these ancient voices, the Sumerians stand out with accounts so precise, so eerily accurate, they seem to defy time itself. What if these texts hold clues to one of the most mysterious and terrifying phenomena in the cosmos, a black hole apocalypse? This isn't just a flight of fancy. It's a journey that connects humanity's oldest stories with the cutting edge of astrophysics, inviting us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about the past and our place in the universe. The idea that ancient people could have described something as complex and distant as a black hole might sound like science fiction, yet the evidence woven into Sumerian mythology is startling. These texts speak of gods and monsters, of chaos and creation, but buried within those tales are descriptions of destructive forces that bear an uncanny resemblance to what we now understand about black holes, entities so powerful they swallow light, warp time, and tear the fabric of space itself. It's a concept that challenges our assumptions about history and science, suggesting that knowledge once lost might be waiting to be rediscovered. As we delve into these ancient narratives, we aren't just reading myths. We are unlocking a language of the cosmos that has been whispering to us across millennia. This video is your invitation to embark on an extraordinary exploration, one that bridges the gap between the dusty archives of antiquity and the dazzling frontiers of modern astronomy. Together, we'll unravel the enigmatic passages of Sumerian texts, decode their symbolic language, and piece together a story that might just rewrite our understanding of human achievement and cosmic destiny. You'll discover how ancient sky watchers might have witnessed or even predicted events that science is still grappling with today. So settle in and open your mind to the possibility that the deepest secrets of the universe have been with us all along, inscribed in stone and story, waiting for the curious to listen. To truly appreciate the gravity of these ancient descriptions, we must first journey back to the very cradle of civilization itself, to the fertile lands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This was the domain of the Sumerians, a people whose innovations so fundamentally shaped human history that we still feel their influence today. They weren't just another ancient culture, they were the originators, the world's first civilization. While others were still in nomadic tribes, the Sumerians were building majestic city-states like and Uruk, complete with towering ziggurats that reached for the heavens, establishing complex governments and creating intricate legal codes. Their societal blueprint became the foundation upon which all subsequent Western civilizations were built. But perhaps their most revolutionary and enduring contribution was the invention of writing. This wasn't merely a primitive form of record-keeping, it was the birth of documented human thought. Using a stylus to press wedge-shaped marks into wet clay, a technique we call cuneiform, they moved beyond simple pictograms to develop a sophisticated syllabic script. This allowed them to record everything from mundane temple inventories and trade receipts to epic poetry, historical chronicles, and most importantly for our exploration, their meticulous observations of the natural world. For the first time, knowledge wasn't just passed down orally, vulnerable to change and loss. It was permanently etched into stone and clay, creating a time capsule that could survive for millennia. This written record is our direct window into the Sumerian mind, and it reveals a startlingly advanced intellectual landscape. Their prowess extended far beyond administration and literature into the precise sciences. The Sumerians developed a complex sexagesimal number system based on the number 60, which is why we still have 60 seconds in a minute and 60 minutes in an hour. This mathematical sophistication was driven by a deep and abiding fascination with the cosmos. They were arguably history's first true astronomers, methodically charting the movements of planets and stars, recognizing patterns, and even predicting celestial events. Their priests, who also served as scholars, spent countless nights gazing upward, not merely as mystics but as early scientists, cataloging their findings with meticulous detail. Their celestial maps were so accurate that they laid the groundwork for all future Babylonian and Greek astronomy. This combination of factors, their position as the first civilization, their invention of durable writing, and their advanced scientific curiosity, creates a compelling case for why their texts might harbor extraordinary insight. They were the first to systematically observe, question, and record the workings of the universe. They weren't filtering their observations through the scientific paradigms we have today. They were describing what they saw in the language and mythological framework available to them. A supernova might be described as a god's fiery chariot, or a planetary alignment might be interpreted as a divine counsel. The literal event is cloaked in symbolism, but the core observation remains. So when their texts speak of unimaginable cosmic violence, of entities that consume light and create chaos in the heavens, we cannot simply dismiss it as pure fantasy. It is far more likely we are reading a profound attempt to explain a witnessed, reality-shattering event using the most powerful vocabulary. They possessed the language of gods and monsters. Yet to truly hear the voices of the Sumerians, we must first learn to read their words, and that is a journey filled with its own profound challenges. The cuneiform script they invented is a marvel of human ingenuity, but it is not a simple alphabet we can easily decode today. It began as pictographs, simple drawings representing objects: a head of grain, a star, an ox. But over centuries, these drawings were stylized and abstracted into those distinctive wedge-shaped impressions made by pressing a reed stylus into soft clay. This evolution from picture to symbol meant that a single sign could have multiple meanings. It could represent the object itself, a related concept, or even a syllable sound depending on the context. This inherent complexity is the first major hurdle for any modern translator, a puzzle where every piece can fit in several different places. The challenge doesn't end with a simple dictionary definition of each sign. Sumerian is a language isolate, meaning it has no known relatives. It isn't connected to Semitic languages like Akkadian or Indo-European languages like English. We have no Rosetta Stone for Sumerian, no perfect bilingual text that neatly unlocks its entire vocabulary and grammar. Our understanding has been painstakingly reconstructed over decades by comparing vast volumes of texts from administrative ledgers to schoolchildren's practice tablets. Scholars must become detectives using context, repetition, and later Akkadian translations that themselves can be imperfect to piece together the meaning of a single, elusive word. This means that our comprehension of Sumerian is not a fixed and finished fact but a living, evolving field of study where a new discovery or a fresh perspective can overturn decades of accepted interpretation. This leads us to the most crucial point for our exploration, the profound impact of translation choices. When a modern scholar looks at a series of wedges describing a cosmic event, the choices they make are not merely academic. The same cluster of signs could be translated as a great wind from the underworld, or as a consuming breath that darkens the sun. One leans into a meteorological interpretation, while the other hints at something far more immense and terrifying. The translator's own worldview, their understanding of history and even physics, inevitably influences their choice of words. A scholar working 50 years ago, for whom black holes were a highly theoretical curiosity, might instinctively choose a more terrestrial or mythological explanation. A translator today, armed with modern astrophysics, might look at the same signs and see a metaphorical description of a phenomenon for which the ancients had no literal vocabulary. Therefore, when we examine these ancient texts for descriptions of cosmic horrors, we must do so with a discerning eye. We are not reading a straightforward scientific report, but a poetic, symbolic, and highly nuanced account filtered through a cultural and linguistic lens vastly different from our own. The terrifying creature known as Tiamat, described as a chaos monster of the saltwater ocean in the Enuma Elish, might be a mythological representation of a primordial force. But could she also be a metaphorical depiction of an accretion disk, the swirling, violent maelstrom of matter and energy that surrounds a black hole? The language used to describe her, she who fashions the monstrous, a creature of immense and chaotic power whose body is split to form the heavens and the earth, is eerily suggestive of a cosmic-scale disruptive event. The key is to look for the consistent, recurring patterns within the symbolism, the core described effects that shine through regardless of the translator's chosen words, all-consuming darkness, unimaginable gravitational force, the distortion of the familiar cosmos, and a point of no return. It is within these potent, enduring motifs that the most compelling secrets are held. To fully grasp the weight of what the Sumerians might have been describing, we need to step into their worldview, a perspective on time and destiny that is fundamentally different from our own. In our modern, linear view of history, time is an arrow shot from a defined beginning toward an inevitable, often catastrophic, end. We speak of an apocalypse as a singular, final event, a point of ultimate destruction after which nothing continues. This concept, heavily influenced by later Judeo-Christian theology, paints the end of the world as a terminus, but for the Mesopotamians, the cosmos operated on a profoundly cyclical rhythm, more akin to the changing of seasons on a grand cosmic scale. Their sense of time was not a straight line but a great wheel, turning through ages of creation, order, chaos, and renewal. This cyclical nature meant their concept of an end was not permanent. Cataclysmic events were not final judgments but rather necessary, recurring phases in the eternal struggle between order and chaos. The universe required periodic resets, moments of unimaginable violence that would clear the slate for a new era to begin. This is beautifully and terrifyingly embodied in their creation myth, the Enuma Elish. The world as they knew it was not formed from nothingness, but from the aftermath of a divine cosmic battle. The orderly god Marduk does not simply create the earth and heavens. He slays the primordial goddess of chaos, Tiamat, and from her dismembered body he fashions the physical universe. Her ribs become the vault of the sky, her weeping eyes become the sources of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This means that the very foundation of their world was built upon a past apocalypse. This myth wasn't just a story about the distant past, it was a template for understanding all future upheavals. A great flood, a devastating plague, or a city being razed by invaders, these were not random tragedies. They were smaller echoes of that primordial chaos, moments where the established order cracked and the raw, destructive power of the cosmos briefly reasserted itself. These events were terrifying, yes, but they were also understood to be part of a natural, repeating cycle. Just as the spring floods could wipe away a village but also leave behind fertile silt for new growth, a cosmic catastrophe could erase a world to make way for the next. This perspective transforms their descriptions of disaster. They are not chronicling a final ending, but documenting a terrifying yet transitional phase. This crucial distinction sheds new light on how we interpret their descriptions of cosmic events. When a Sumerian text speaks of a black sun or a star that consumes the others, a modern reader might instinctively see a prediction of a one-time doomsday. But through the Mesopotamian lens, the scribe is likely describing a recognized, albeit extreme, cosmological phenomenon, a violent but perhaps periodic occurrence within the function of the universe. They are observers of a system they believe operates in cycles, and they are recording what they perceive to be a part of that predictable, albeit terrifying, pattern. This doesn't make the event less real, it simply frames it within their understanding of how the cosmos renews itself. Therefore, their texts are not cries of despair in the face of absolute annihilation. They are meticulous records of observed celestial mechanics, filtered through a mythological framework that expected and accepted periodic, world-shattering chaos. The monster Tiamat isn't just a defeated enemy from the past. She is the eternal embodiment of the chaotic potential that always exists, waiting to break through. A description of her rage is not merely a poetic metaphor. It is a sophisticated way of articulating the awesome, destructive power of a cosmic force that operates on a scale far beyond human comprehension, a force we might now give a different name. This scientific perspective gives us a completely new lens through which to re-examine the ancient texts. If the Sumerians witnessed or even conceived of something akin to a black hole, they would have lacked our precise vocabulary. They wouldn't describe an event horizon or spaghettification. Instead, they would turn to the most powerful language they had, the language of myth, of gods and monsters, of cosmic battles and world-ending chaos. The terrifying, all-consuming void we call a black hole might be depicted as a gaping maw of a primordial dragon. The irresistible gravitational pull that stretches and compresses everything in its path could be described as the binding magic of a powerful deity. The utter darkness from which not even light can escape becomes a desolate underworld or abyssal ocean of nothingness. When we hear their stories of Tiamat, the chaotic saltwater sea who gives birth to monsters, we can now ask a provocative question. Were they poetically illustrating the violent accretion disk of a singularity, a swirling storm of cosmic material being torn apart before vanishing forever? The scientific baseline provides the key, allowing us to listen to these ancient stories not as superstition, but as potential reports from the frontier of human observation, encoded in the only language they had available to describe the indescribable. At the very heart of Mesopotamian cosmology lies the Enuma Elish, a creation epic of such profound complexity that it transcends mere mythology. While recorded by the Babylonians who revered their god Marduk as its hero, its roots dig deep into older Sumerian traditions, preserving a worldview that saw the universe's birth not in peaceful design, but in violent, cataclysmic conflict. The poem opens not with light, but with a description of a primordial state of watery chaos, a universe before form and order, inhabited only by two vast entities, the sweet water god Apsu and the saltwater goddess Tiamat, who is described as the glistening one, the mother of all things, a creature of immense and swirling potential. This is not an empty void, it is a seething, energetic, and unstable plasma of existence, a perfect mythological analog for the dense, chaotic state of the early universe or the turbulent accretion disk surrounding a singularity. The narrative thrust of the epic is set in motion by the emergence of younger, louder gods from the union of these primordial forces. Their energy and noise disrupt the stagnant peace of the old order, provoking Apsu to plot their destruction for the sake of quiet. But it is Tiamat who, after Apsu is slain by the clever god E, transforms into the ultimate agent of cosmic vengeance. Grieving and enraged, she fashions an army of monstrous, venom-filled creatures and appoints her new consort, Kingu, as its commander, preparing to unleash absolute chaos upon the divine order. This is the pivotal moment where the stage is set for a battle that is far more than a simple fight between good and evil. It is a fundamental clash between the forces of form and the raw, untamable power of formlessness. This is where the narrative aligns with startling precision with modern astrophysics. Tiamat is not a dragon in a fairy tale, her description is cosmological. She is the roaring, chaotic sea, a body of swirling, turbulent energy. She opens her mouth a vast, gaping maw, and within it she creates monstrous weapons, sharp serpent teeth, coiled viper fangs, and a terrifying army. Could this be a symbolic depiction of the accretion disk of a black hole? This disk, composed of superheated gas, dust, and stellar debris, swirls at velocities approaching the speed of light, stretching and compressing matter in a violent, luminous storm before it crosses the event horizon and vanishes. The monsters she creates could be metaphors for the extreme physical forces at play: tidal forces that spaghettify objects, intense radiation jets, and gravitational waves that ripple through the fabric of spacetime itself. The climactic battle between Marduk and Tiamat reads less like a sword fight and more like a physicist describing the mechanics of a singularity. Marduk, representing order and defined structure, arms himself with the four winds, a possible metaphor for the fundamental forces of the universe. He ensnares Tiamat in a net, a powerful image of a gravitational field trapping everything within its reach. He then rides his chariot, a storm of unimaginable power, directly into her open mouth. He launches the Imhalu wind, the evil wind, down into her belly, inflating her and tearing her apart from the inside. This is a breathtakingly accurate description of a black hole's paradoxical nature. The point of ultimate compression, the singularity, is also the source of immense, explosive energy, the relativistic jets that can shoot out from the poles of an active black hole. Marduk doesn't just stab Tiamat, he uses her own chaotic energy against her, causing an internal rupture of cosmic proportions. The aftermath of this battle is where creation and destruction become one and the same. Victorious, Marduk does not discard Tiamat's corpse. He methodically dissects it, using her physical form to engineer the ordered universe. He splits her body into two parts like a clamshell. One half he lifts up to form the heavens, the other he places down to form the earth. He assigns stations to the great gods, establishes the cycles of the stars and planets, and from the blood of the defeated Kingu, he creates humanity to serve the gods. This act of cosmic engineering mirrors the aftermath of a colossal astronomical event. The material and energy spewed forth from a galactic-scale collision or a quasar's outburst. The very material that was once part of the destructive chaos becomes the building blocks for new star systems, new planets, and ultimately, new possibilities for life. The epic tells us that our ordered world, the very sky above us, is built upon the corpse of a vanquished monster of chaos, a poetic truth that finds a powerful echo in the scientific understanding that every atom in our bodies was forged in the heart of a long-dead star. While the Enuma Elish offers a grand, cosmic-scale view of creation through destruction, another Sumerian myth provides a far more intimate and terrifyingly personal portrait of a journey into the absolute unknown, the harrowing descent of the goddess Inanna into the underworld. This is not a tale of external cosmic battle, but an internal, psychological odyssey that maps almost perfectly onto the physical and existential experience of approaching a black hole. Inanna, the Queen of Heaven, is a deity of life, fertility, and power, representing all that is vibrant and ordered. Her decision to abandon her celestial domains and descend to the realm of her dark sister, Ereshkigal, is an act that defies her very nature, setting the stage for a narrative rich with metaphorical potential for a point of no return. The preparation for her journey is our first clue that this is no ordinary trip. Inanna doesn't simply walk into the underworld, she meticulously prepares, instructing her vizier, Ninchuba, on exactly what to do if she does not return. She then gathers 7 divine me or powers, adorning herself with a turban, a wig, lapis lazuli beads, a pectoral, a golden ring, and holding a lapis measuring rod. Each item is a symbol of her identity, her authority, and her connection to the world above. This act of armoring herself in her own power can be seen as a metaphorical representation of a spacecraft or an individual carrying all the energy, information, and structure of the ordered universe with them as they approach the ultimate realm of disorder. She is in effect taking a record of her entire reality with her to the brink. Her arrival at the outer gates of the underworld marks the first major threshold, a moment fraught with symbolic gravity. The gatekeeper, Neti, challenges her, demanding to know why she has come. Inanna concocts a story about attending the funeral rites of Ereshkigal's husband, but the true reason remains shrouded, much like the unknowable nature of what lies beyond a black hole's event horizon. Neti relays the message to Ereshkigal, who responds with a reaction of pure, visceral rage. Yet, she gives the order to open the gates, instructing Neti to bolt each one behind Inanna as she passes through, and most crucially, to strip her of her divine garments at each of the 7 gates. This systematic dismantling is the core of the metaphor. Imagine each of those 7 gates as a gravitational gradient, a successive threshold closer to the event horizon. At the first gate, Inanna's towering turban, a symbol of her supreme authority, is removed. At the next, her lapis lazuli beads are taken. One by one, every item that defines her is stripped away. Her measuring rod, the instrument of cosmic order, is surrendered. This is a powerful analog for the physical process of spaghettification, where the immense tidal forces of a black hole would stretch and compress an object, fundamentally altering its form. But the myth delves even deeper into the psychological and existential ramifications. It's not just her body that is being unmade, it is her very identity. Every title, every power, every external marker of who she is systematically removed until she stands naked and bowed low before her sister's throne. This is the ultimate loss of information, the irreversible scattering of the complex structures that made her Inanna. In astrophysical terms, all the information she carried, her mass, her energy, her unique configuration, is being lost to the singularity, a paradox that still puzzles physicists today. The final chilling scene of her descent sees the once mighty Queen of Heaven brought low. Naked and powerless, she attempts to take Ereshkigal's throne, only for the 7 Anunnaki judges of the underworld to render their verdict against her. They fix her with the eyes of death, and her corpse is hung on a hook. In this state, all motion, all life, all processes cease. This is the state of crossing the event horizon from the perspective of an outside observer. To the universe she left behind, Inanna appears frozen in time at the moment of her death, her form stretched and ghostly, never quite completing her fall. This perfectly mirrors how a distant observer would see an object approach a black hole. Its light would redshift into infinity. Its image would appear to slow down and freeze, never actually witnessing it cross the threshold. The myth captures both the internal experience of total dissolution and the external observation of eternal stasis. Yet, the story does not end there, offering a fascinating twist on the concept of irreversibility. Through the intervention of the gods and the cunning of Ninshubur, Inanna is eventually revived and allowed to ascend. However, she cannot return to the world above alone. A substitute must be found to take her place in the underworld. This condition introduces a profound cosmological principle. A price must be paid for escaping such a powerful gravitational well. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transferred. Her return to the living world comes at the direct cost of another's descent, often interpreted as her husband, Dumuzid. This echoes the theoretical Hawking radiation, where a black hole can slowly lose mass and energy, but only by creating and emitting particle-antiparticle pairs at its edge, a process that still ultimately preserves the overall informational and energetic balance of the system. Inanna's journey, therefore, is not a simple round trip. It is a transformation that leaves the cosmos permanently altered, a scar in the fabric of reality where an exchange has been forced, reminding us that some thresholds once approached change everything forever. If the descent of Inanna offers a metaphorical blueprint for crossing a point of no return, the Epic of Gilgamesh provides us with a detailed logbook of a mortal's journey to the very edge of the cosmos and back. Gilgamesh, the powerful but arrogant king of Uruk, is shattered by the death of his friend Enkidu. This profound loss forces him to confront his own mortality, sparking a desperate, obsessive quest not for wisdom or power, but for the one thing denied to all humans: eternal life. His journey is not one of conquest, but of vulnerability, a stark contrast to his earlier exploits, and it pushes him far beyond the boundaries of the known world into realms of staggering celestial wonder and peril. This epic, often called the first great work of literature, transcends a simple adventure story. It reads as a profound exploration of humanity's place in a vast and often terrifying universe. His path leads him to the only man said to have achieved immortality, Utnapishtim, the Mesopotamian Noah, who survived a great flood and was granted eternal life by the gods. To reach Utnapishtim's distant dwelling, Gilgamesh must undertake a voyage that is as much astronomical as it is geographical. He travels to the twin peaks of Mashu, a mountain that marks the literal end of the world, the place where the sun was believed to rise and set. Guarding this gateway are the terrifying scorpion beings, monstrous hybrids whose very gaze is death. Their description is not merely mythological decoration. It evokes the kind of extreme radiation or energetic phenomena that could exist near a region of intense spacetime curvature. They are guardians of a threshold, and upon recognizing the divine part of Gilgamesh within his mortal shell, they permit him passage, warning him of the absolute darkness that lies ahead. What follows is one of the most evocative passages in all of ancient literature, Gilgamesh's journey through the tunnel of the sun. For 12 double hours, a significant celestial number, he travels in complete, impenetrable blackness. He cannot see ahead or behind. He is utterly devoid of sensory input, navigating a path that is predetermined and inescapable. This is a breathtakingly accurate description of traversing a region where gravity is so intense that light itself cannot escape its pull, a perfect analog for the experience within the photon sphere that can surround a black hole, a zone of no return where spacetime is bent into a closed loop. He emerges not into a sunny paradise, but into the brilliant, jeweled garden of the gods, a place that shimmers with crystalline trees and lapis lazuli foliage. This could easily be interpreted as the other side of the gravitational lens, the shocking, distorted, and brilliantly illuminated view of the universe from a point of extreme observational privilege, where light is bent into impossible patterns. His eventual meeting with Utnapishtim delivers the cruel, cosmic truth. Utnapishtim explains that his immortality was a unique gift from terrified gods in the aftermath of the flood, a one-time event that cannot be repeated. To demonstrate the impossibility of Gilgamesh's quest, Utnapishtim challenges him to a simple test: stay awake for just 6 days and 7 nights. Gilgamesh fails immediately, falling into a deep, week-long sleep, proving he cannot even conquer his own mortal body, let alone the laws of the cosmos. In a final act of pity, Utnapishtim's wife convinces her husband to tell Gilgamesh of a secret plant that grows at the bottom of the ocean, a plant that can restore a man's youth, though not grant eternal life. This shift from immortality to rejuvenation is critical. It signifies a move from defying cosmic law to working within its cycles, a very Mesopotamian compromise. Gilgamesh dives to the abyssal depths, retrieves the thorny plant, and begins his journey home filled with hope. He plans to test it on an old man first to ensure it works before using it himself. This moment represents a profound character transformation, from a tyrant who claimed droit de seigneur to a king thinking of his elders, but his triumph is brutally stolen. While he stops to bathe in a cool pool, a serpent drawn by the plant's scent slithers up and steals it, immediately shedding its skin and being reborn. In this single, heartbreaking moment, the epic delivers its ultimate lesson. The serpent, an ancient symbol of cyclical time and renewal, is the only creature naturally capable of what Gilgamesh seeks. It doesn't need a magical plant. It is inherently part of the universe's rhythm of death and rebirth. Gilgamesh is left empty-handed, weeping on the shore, but he returns to Uruk a changed man. He has not conquered death, but he has finally accepted his place within the vast, beautiful, and unforgiving order of the cosmos, choosing to find immortality not in endless life, but in the enduring legacy of the city walls he built, a legacy we are still deciphering today. Their celestial understanding went far beyond simple stargazing, representing a formalized science of astonishing precision. The Sumerians didn't just see a random scattering of lights in the night sky. They recognized a complex, ordered system governed by predictable laws. They meticulously charted the paths of the 5 visible planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, differentiating them from the fixed stars by their erratic, wandering motions, an observation that required patient, long-term record-keeping. Their catalogue of constellations forms the very bedrock of Western astronomy. The zodiac we recognize today has its direct origins in Sumerian star maps. They could predict lunar eclipses and track the precise movements of the sun and moon to create sophisticated calendars that guided their agricultural and religious lives. This wasn't a hobby, it was a disciplined, scholarly pursuit conducted by priest astronomers who spent generations compiling their data onto countless clay tablets. The true measure of their sophistication lies in the mathematical tools they developed to decode the cosmos. Their unique sexagesimal system, based on the number 60, was perfectly suited for astronomy and timekeeping, which is why we still divide a circle into 360 degrees and an hour into 60 minutes. This numerical framework allowed them to calculate complex celestial cycles with remarkable accuracy. They understood the concept of a celestial sphere and could track the precession of the equinoxes, the slow, wobbling shift in Earth's rotational axis that takes 26,000 years to complete. Grasping this incredibly slow cycle required conceptualizing deep time on a scale that is almost incomprehensible, suggesting a scientific culture capable of thinking in million-year increments, not just annual harvest cycles. This profound astronomical competence is what makes their descriptions of anomalous, terrifying events so compelling. When a culture that can predict the steady, regular motion of Venus with precision suddenly records a star that eats its brothers or a god whose mouth is darkness, we must pay close attention. These were not superstitious people startled by a common meteor shower. They were expert observers, the equivalent of today's astrophysicists, and their terminology for normal celestial events was usually measured and descriptive. Therefore, when their language shifts dramatically to describe something as violently disruptive and outside the established order, it carries immense weight. They were describing an event that broke their understood rules of the cosmos, something so unprecedented and terrifying that it forced them to abandon their technical vocabulary for the only language powerful enough to capture its horror, the language of myth and divine warfare. We can contrast this with how other ancient cultures recorded unusual events. A solar eclipse might be described as a dragon swallowing the sun, a metaphorical but understandable interpretation of a fleeting, hours-long phenomenon. The Sumerian accounts we've been examining, however, speak of a lasting, all-consuming darkness and a destructive force that fundamentally reshapes the heavens. The credibility of these reports stems directly from the source. It's the difference between a casual hiker reporting a strange light in the forest and a trained pilot reporting an unidentified craft with specific flight characteristics that defy known physics. The pilot's report is taken seriously because of their expert frame of reference. Similarly, the Sumerian descriptions demand serious consideration precisely because they come from a society with a demonstrated, sophisticated understanding of what should be happening in the sky. Their baseline was one of expert knowledge, which makes their accounts of events that shattered that baseline some of the most credible and chilling ancient records we possess. Among the most haunting and persistent motifs found in Sumerian astronomical records is the recurring image of the black sun, a direct and terrifying contradiction to the very source of life and light. These are not mere references to a temporary eclipse, an event the Sumerians understood and could predict with remarkable accuracy. Instead, these texts speak of a more permanent, more profound darkness, a sun that is extinguished, a star that is consumed or simply vanishes from its rightful place in the heavens. In the Great Lamentation over the destruction of we find phrases that chill the blood describing how the sun was obscured in the heavens and the bright day was turned into gloom, not for hours but for an extended catastrophic period. This language suggests a fundamental alteration of the celestial order, a darkness that was not an absence of light, but a presence of something that actively consumed it. To understand the gravity of these descriptions, we must first separate them from more common astronomical phenomena. A solar eclipse, while awe-inspiring, is a transient event caused by the moon's passage between the Earth and the Sun. The Sumerians knew this. They tracked the Saros cycle and could anticipate these occurrences. Their descriptions of eclipses are typically matter-of-fact within their mythological framework. The black sun they describe is something else entirely. It is a sun that has been put out like a torch, a star that has been eaten or swallowed, leaving behind not just temporary shadow but a void. This evokes a far more radical and terrifying concept: the complete and permanent disappearance of a celestial body from the observable universe, an event for which their only logical explanation was that it had been consumed by some unimaginable power. This is where our modern understanding of black holes provides a startlingly plausible interpretation. One of the most straightforward ways a black hole can reveal itself is not by what we see, but by what we stop seeing. A black hole itself is invisible. Its presence is inferred by its devastating gravitational influence on its surroundings. If a stellar mass black hole were to pass between our solar system and a distant star, the effect would be utterly bewildering to an observer. The black hole's immense gravity would act as a gravitational lens, bending the light from the star behind it. But from a specific vantage point, it could also simply block that star's light entirely, causing it to seemingly wink out of existence without explanation. For a culture that mapped the heavens with religious devotion, the sudden, inexplicable vanishing of a familiar star would be a moment of profound cosmic terror, an event that shattered their understanding of a fixed and orderly universe. The Sumerian text known as the Poem of Error offers a particularly vivid and violent depiction that aligns with this idea. In it, the god of plague and warfare, Error, is persuaded by his vengeful weapons to unleash chaos upon the world. The poem describes the aftermath of his rage in cosmic terms: the bright daylight he made into darkness, the white dawn he shrouded in gloom. This is more than a metaphor for a dust storm. It is a description of a fundamental pollution of the sky itself. The text continues, stating that Error obscured the face of the shining stars, making them disappear as though they had never been. The specific phrasing, "as though they had never been," is critical. It doesn't say the stars are hidden behind clouds. It states they are erased from reality, their very existence negated. This is the precise perceptual effect an intervening black hole would have on the light of background stars, effectively deleting them from the celestial map. Furthermore, some interpretations of cuneiform tablets point to descriptions of celestial bodies that are not merely dark, but that are described as holes or gates in the fabric of the sky. One such account speaks of a doorway of the gods that is blacker than night, a void through which even the light of the deities cannot pass. This moves beyond the observation of a missing star and into the realm of describing the phenomenon itself. Not just the absence of light, but the presence of an absolute, light-devouring aperture in the heavens. For the Sumerians, a gate was a threshold, a point of transition from one state of being to another. To describe a dark celestial object as a gate is to conceptualize it not as a dead thing, but as an active, transformative entity, a passageway into an unknown and terrifying realm. This aligns perfectly with our concept of a black hole's event horizon, the ultimate point of no return, a gateway from which nothing, not even information, can return to our universe. The cumulative weight of these references paints a picture far more sophisticated than simple myth-making. It suggests a culture of expert observers documenting genuine celestial anomalies that defied their existing frameworks of understanding. When your entire cosmology, agriculture, and religion are built upon the predictable cycles of the sun, moon, and stars, The sudden and inexplicable disappearance of one of those anchors would be a cataclysm that shakes civilization to its core. It would be interpreted as the wrath of the gods, the unraveling of cosmic order, the approach of the primordial chaos represented by Tiamat. Their response was to record these events in the most powerful language they possessed, using the imagery of divine warfare and consumption to convey the sheer scale and terror of witnessing a part of their universe being systematically unmade by a force they could not see, only infer from its devastating effects on the light around it. To truly grasp the depth of the Sumerian understanding, we need to venture beyond the dramatic celestial battles and descend into the more fundamental, and perhaps even more terrifying, concepts that underpin their entire cosmology, the Abzu and the Ker. These weren't just places on a mythical map, they were primordial principles foundational to their understanding of existence itself. The Abzu, often translated as the abyss, was not a dark, scary place of punishment. It was the sacred, subterranean ocean of fresh water from which all life was believed to have sprung, the domain of the wise god Enki. It represented the deep, hidden source of all potential, the cosmic aquifer of creation. Yet its descriptions often carry a paradoxical weight, a sense of immense, quiet power that is both generative and profoundly consuming. The Ker, or the Great Below, is a broader and more ominous concept. It was the vast, mountainous realm of the underworld, a land of no return ruled by the goddess Ereshkigal. Unlike later concepts of hell, it wasn't a place of moral judgment and fiery torment. It was a neutral but utterly desolate land of dust and silence where the dead existed as faint, whispering shadows. The journey to the Ker was consistently described as a difficult, one-way descent. Texts speak of a road from which no traveler returns, a path that leads ever downward into a region of overwhelming gloom. This wasn't merely a poetic metaphor for death. It was a geographical and cosmological description of a realm with its own inescapable physical laws, a place that exerted a pull so absolute that escape was ontologically impossible. When we examine the language used to describe the approach to the Ker, the parallels to gravitational phenomena become difficult to ignore. The descent is never described as a voluntary walk. It is often portrayed as being pulled or drawn downward by an irresistible force. The gravitational pull of a black hole operates on the exact same principle. Beyond a certain point, its attraction is so overwhelming that any notion of choice or resistance is rendered meaningless. The laws of physics that govern the universe outside simply cease to apply. Furthermore, the Sumerian depiction of the Ker as a land of silence and stillness is profoundly telling. In our universe, sound cannot travel in a vacuum because it requires a medium like air to propagate. The utter silence of the Ker could be a metaphorical interpretation of the absolute void surrounding a singularity, a perfect vacuum where no vibration, no signal, no sound can exist or be transmitted. The most striking parallel lies in the concept of irretrievable loss. The Sumerians didn't believe you could send a heroic rescue party to the Ker to retrieve a soul. What entered was gone forever, its essence fundamentally altered. This is a powerful conceptual match for the black hole's event horizon, the ultimate point of no return. Once matter or energy crosses this boundary, it is causally disconnected from our universe. No information about its state can ever be communicated back out. In both the Sumerian and the astrophysical models, a fundamental transformation occurs that severs all connection with the previous state of existence. The Ker doesn't just hide things, it absorbs and transforms them into something else, just as a black hole incorporates all ingested matter into its unknowable singularity. Perhaps the most compelling link is found in the descriptions of the Abzu's nature. While a source of life-giving water, it was also described as a deep, placid, and profoundly heavy body that exerted a quiet, constant pull. This evokes the concept of a gravitational field itself, an invisible, pervasive force that bends space and draws objects toward a center of mass. The Sumerians perceived this force not as an abstract equation, but as a tangible, almost liquid pressure inherent in the deepest foundations of the world. They sensed that the universe had a weight to it, a foundational gravity that held things together and pulled things down. Their abyss wasn't empty, it was full of this potent, latent force, waiting to be tapped by a deity like Enki, but also capable of holding things in an eternal, quiet embrace from which there was no emergence. This sophisticated intuition of a fundamental cosmic force, expressed through the rich language of myth and primordial geography, suggests an observation of reality that was both deeply spiritual and startlingly perceptive. This sophisticated understanding of cosmic forces finds a particularly mind-bending parallel in how Sumerian myths describe the very fabric of time itself. For a culture that meticulously tracked the predictable cycles of the moon and seasons, the concept of time was not a vague abstraction. It was a measurable, rhythmic constant that governed everything from planting crops to religious ceremonies. Yet, their stories are filled with moments where this fundamental constant breaks down, where time behaves in ways that are strange, fluid, and utterly non-linear. These aren't presented as simple magic tricks, but as inherent properties of certain sacred or terrifying locations, suggesting the Sumerians were grappling with a cosmological principle that modern physics would only begin to understand millennia later. That gravity doesn't just bend space, it also warps time. One of the most profound examples comes from the aftermath of Gilgamesh's journey through the tunnel of the sun. When he finally arrives in the jeweled garden of the gods and meets the immortal flood hero Utnapishtim, he is given what seems like a simple test. Utnapishtim challenges the exhausted king to stay awake for just 6 days and 7 nights to prove his worthiness for immortality. Gilgamesh immediately fails, sitting down and falling into a deep, death-like sleep. He awakes what feels like only moments later, vehemently denying that he slept at all, only for Utnapishtim's wife to intervene, revealing the shocking truth. She tells Gilgamesh to count the loaves of bread they had placed beside him, each one representing a day that had passed. There were 7, all in varying states of decay, one fresh, one moldy, one dried out, and so on. Gilgamesh had not napped, he had slept for 7 solid days without any perception of the time elapsing. This narrative operates on 2 levels. On the surface, it's a moral lesson on the impossibility of conquering human mortality. But on a deeper, cosmological level, it reads like a precise description of time dilation. Gilgamesh, having journeyed to the very edge of the known world, a region the myth heavily implies is a place of immense gravitational influence or cosmic strangeness, experiences time at a radically different rate than the outside world. His subjective experience is of a brief moment, while 7 full days pass in the rest of the universe. This is exactly what happens near a massive gravitational object like a black hole. Time for an observer close to the event horizon would appear to slow to a crawl when viewed from a distance. Utnapishtim, residing in this liminal space, exists outside of normal time, which is why he can perceive its flow accurately, while Gilgamesh, having just arrived from this distorted realm, is physically present but his internal clock is still out of sync with local time. The myth of Inanna's Descent provides another fascinating angle, focusing on the observational paradox of time's passage. From the perspective of the world above, Inanna is gone. Her vizier, Ninshuba, follows her instructions to the letter, lamenting and pleading with the gods for 3 days and 3 nights after her disappearance. This period of mourning represents the measurable, linear time that passes in the ordered universe. Meanwhile, Inanna's subjective experience in the underworld is one of rapid, successive, and traumatic transformation. She is processed through 7 gates, stripped at each one, judged, and killed, a sequence of events that feels immediate and relentless to her. The myth creates a distinct disconnect between how long her journey feels from the inside and how long it takes from the outside. This mirrors the relativistic effect where an astronaut falling into a black hole would experience their own fall in a finite amount of time, while a distant observer would see their image slow down, redden, and freeze at the event horizon, never actually witnessing the crossing. Inanna is, from the upper world's perspective, frozen in the moment of her death for the entire 3 days, a ghost at the threshold. Furthermore, the Sumerian cosmological view itself embeds a form of temporal distortion. Their concept of cyclical time, where history and catastrophe were destined to repeat in great ages, suggests a non-linear understanding of causality. The past wasn't a locked door, it was a template for the future. This is echoed in the behavior of light and information near a singularity, where the extreme curvature of spacetime can create closed time-like curves, theoretical paths that could, in principle, allow for loops in time. While the Sumerians weren't describing time travel, their world view allowed for the past to actively inform and even manifest in the future in a way that feels more resonant with the bizarre physics of extreme gravity than with a simple, straightforward arrow of time. These myths consistently point to a sophisticated, if intuitive, understanding that time is not the universal constant it appears to be. They identified specific threshold places: the gate to the underworld, the tunnel of the sun, the dwelling of the immortals where the normal rules dissolved. In these zones, time became elastic, subjective, and terrifyingly unpredictable. They described effects that align stunningly well with what we now know happens in the most extreme gravitational environments in the universe. Time slows down, a traveler's experience diverges radically from an outside observer's, and the very directionality of cause and effect can become blurred. The Sumerians encoded this profound insight not in equations, but in the most powerful narrative language available to them, gifting us stories that feel less like superstition and more like the earliest recorded thought experiments on the nature of spacetime itself. Among the most captivating and terrifying figures in Sumerian cosmology are the celestial dragons and cosmic devourers, beings of immense power whose sole purpose seems to be the consumption of light and order. These are not the simple serpents of later myths. They are primordial forces given form, described in texts as vast, scaled creatures that soar through the heavens, their gaping maws capable of swallowing stars whole. One such entity, often associated with the goddess Tiamat's monstrous army, is referred to as the Mushachek-1E2, Bushachek-U, or the Furious Serpent, a hybrid beast with horns, the forelegs of a lion, and the hind legs of an eagle. Its very name evokes a sense of relentless, fiery anger, and its domain was the sky, where it was said to blaze a trail of darkness in its wake. This imagery moves far beyond a simple animal. It is a personification of a destructive cosmic process, a visual representation of something that moves through the starry expanse and leaves void in its path. The behavior of these mythological monsters aligns with stunning accuracy to the observable phenomena associated with black holes, particularly the process of accretion. When a black hole exists in a binary system or drifts through a dense cloud of interstellar gas, it doesn't just sit passively in the dark. Its immense gravity pulls matter toward it, stretching and compressing that material into a superheated, swirling disk that orbits the event horizon at nearly the speed of light. This accretion disk is one of the most violent and energetic environments in the universe, glowing with intense radiation across the electromagnetic spectrum as friction and magnetic fields heat the matter to millions of degrees. To an ancient astronomer, this swirling, luminous vortex of doomed matter, screaming its last in a blaze of X-rays and light, would appear precisely as a furious, coiled serpent, a monstrous, luminous beast in the act of devouring its prey. The language used to describe these cosmic devourers is particularly telling. Sumerian texts speak of creatures that eat the light of the gods or swallow the fixed stars, phrasing that suggests not a temporary obscurement like a cloud but a permanent deletion. The star is gone, its light extinguished from the sky forever. This is the exact effect a black hole would have on the background stellar field from a distant observer's perspective. Its gravitational lensing could distort the light of stars behind it, creating strange arcs and rings, but its sheer presence could also simply block that light from view, making those stars vanish as if they had never existed. For a culture that deified the planets and stars, seeing a familiar, named star suddenly wink out of the heavens would be an event of profound religious and existential terror, an act of deicide that could only be explained by the arrival of an unimaginably hungry celestial predator. Furthermore, the descriptions of these dragons often include details about the breath or the voice they emit as they feed. Some texts describe a roar that silences the heavens or a wind that scatters the constellations. This powerfully evokes another key feature of active black holes: relativistic jets. Not all consumed matter crosses the event horizon. A fraction of it can be channeled and accelerated by the black hole's powerful magnetic fields and shot out from its poles at nearly the speed of light. These jets, stretching for thousands of light years, are colossal beams of energy and particles that can outshine entire galaxies. They are the black hole's voice, a torrent of radiation so powerful it can clear vast regions of space of star-forming gas and rewire the evolution of everything around it. The Sumerian image of a dragon whose breath scatters the stars is a near-perfect metaphorical description of these jets, a directed, devastating exhalation of pure force emanating from the site of a cosmic feast. This interpretation transforms these myths from superstitious stories into potential records of witnessed astronomical events. The Sumerians were meticulous observers. If a stellar mass black hole in a binary system went through an active accretion phase, flaring brightly in the sky for a period of years or decades before settling back into dormancy, they would have recorded it. They would have tracked its position, noted its unusual behavior, and struggled to explain it within their cultural framework. The result would be the creation of a new celestial character in their cosmic drama: the devourer, the dragon, the consumer of light. Its story would be woven into the existing tapestry of gods and monsters, not as a fictional creation, but as the best possible explanation for a real, terrifying, and awe-inspiring phenomenon that played out right before their eyes. These myths may very well be our oldest written records of humanity's first, unconscious encounters with the most extreme objects in the universe. At the very heart of Mesopotamian power, both divine and cosmic, lies the concept of the me, the fundamental decrees that established and maintained all aspects of civilization and the natural world. These were not merely laws or ideas, they were the tangible, active building blocks of reality itself, governing everything from kingship and truth to crafts and seduction. To control the me was to hold the very fabric of existence in one's hands, and the ultimate expression of this control, the master key to the cosmic order, was found in a set of artifacts of unimaginable power, the 7 tablets of destiny. These were not simple clay inscriptions. In myth, they were physical objects, often depicted as being worn on the chest of the supreme deity, and their possession was synonymous with ultimate authority over the universe. The epic tales describe these tablets in awe-inspiring terms. They were said to hold the fates of all things, dictating the predetermined paths of gods, humans, and the cosmos itself. To wear them was to command the celestial movements, the rising and setting of the sun, the phases of the moon, the stately procession of the stars across the night sky. The god who held them could even control the movements of the planets, the wandering stars whose complex motions the Sumerians had so meticulously charted. This was the ultimate power, not just to observe the clockwork of the heavens, but to be its master clockmaker, setting the rates of spin, the angles of orbit, and the very flow of cosmic time. Without them, the universe would descend back into the primordial chaos from which it was formed. This mythological function finds a breathtaking parallel in the most extreme gravitational environment we know, the ergosphere of a rotating black hole. Unlike the event horizon, the spherical point of no return, the ergosphere is an oblate region of warped space-time surrounding the black hole, dragged around by its immense spin. Within this region, something extraordinary happens, a phenomenon known as frame dragging. The rotation of the black hole is so powerful that it literally twists the fabric of spacetime itself, forcing everything within the ergosphere to rotate along with it. Nothing can stand still, not light, not matter, not even the flow of time itself is immune to this irresistible drag. In this region, the black hole doesn't just pull things inward, it dictates their motion, commanding them to move in concert with its own spin. This is a near-perfect physical analog for the power of the Tablets of Destiny. The entity that controls the black hole, by virtue of its mass and spin, literally controls the movement of spacetime in its vicinity. It sets the rules for how everything within its gravitational domain must behave. If the Sumerians were metaphorically describing an encounter with or observation of such an object, the Tablets of Destiny become a powerful symbol for the parameters of the singularity itself, its mass, its spin, its charge. These are the fundamental properties that determine the size of the event horizon, the extent of the ergosphere, and the ferocity of the frame-dragging effect. To hold these parameters is to wield control over the entire gravitational landscape the black hole creates. The mythological struggle for these tablets further deepens the connection. In one key myth, the monstrous bird god Anzu steals the Tablets of Destiny from the god Enlil, seeking to usurp divine authority and rewrite the cosmic order to its own chaotic will. The theft plunges the world into crisis, the prescribed rhythms of nature falter, and the gods are thrown into panic. The hero god Ninurta is ultimately sent to battle Anzu and retrieve them, restoring order to the universe. This narrative beautifully illustrates a core principle of general relativity, that mass and energy tells spacetime how to curve, and that curved spacetime tells mass and energy how to move. The being that controls the tablets, the central mass, controls the curvature. If that control is disrupted or transferred to another entity, the very geometry of the universe in that locality is altered. The myth could be interpreted as an observation of a cosmic event where the gravitational dominance in a system shifts, perhaps through a collision or the capture of one massive object by another, temporarily throwing the observed motions of surrounding stars into disarray before a new equilibrium is established. Ultimately, the 7 Tablets of Destiny represent the Sumerian attempt to conceptualize the existence of immutable cosmic laws. They understood that the heavens moved not by whim, but by a strict, unbreakable decree, a set of rules written into the foundation of reality. Their mythology personified these rules as physical objects to be worn and wielded. We have refined that concept into the mathematical laws of physics, and in doing so, we have discovered that the most extreme manifestation of those laws is a black hole, an object whose gravitational influence is the absolute embodiment of control. It dictates paths, bends light, drags spacetime, and sets the clock for every particle that dares to approach. The tablets were the symbol of that ultimate authority, and in the silent, spinning darkness of a singularity, we may have found their physical counterpart. While the epic tales of Tiamat and Gilgamesh provide a symbolic language for cosmic forces, the beings believed to wield this power were known by a specific name, the Anunnaki. This pantheon of deities wasn't merely a collection of whimsical characters. They were described as the ultimate architects and administrators of the universe, the ones who held the Me and the Tablets of Destiny. Their name itself is often interpreted as meaning those of royal blood or princely offspring, suggesting a hierarchical, almost bureaucratic structure to cosmic governance. But beyond their divine status, the Anunnaki were consistently portrayed as possessing knowledge and capabilities that far exceeded the understanding of ordinary humans, particularly in their mastery of the heavens. Their descriptions, when viewed through a modern lens, seem to point less toward magical omnipotence and more toward a sophisticated, almost technological command of astrophysical principles. The Sumerian texts depict the Anunnaki not as distant, ethereal spirits, but as active, physical beings who interacted directly with the world. They were said to travel between their celestial abodes and Earth, often in fiery chariots or vessels that roared across the sky. They possessed weapons of immense destructive power, capable of leveling cities with a single blast, and tools that could alter the very landscape. Most importantly, they were the original bearers of all advanced knowledge, the ones who gifted humanity with the essentials of civilization: agriculture, mathematics, law, and crucially, the science of astronomy. This portrayal invites a provocative line of inquiry. Could the legendary abilities of the Anunnaki represent an ancient attempt to describe a culture or species with a profound understanding of, and perhaps even an origin linked to, extreme astrophysical environments? Consider their described method of travel between worlds. The epics speak of long, perilous journeys through the dark, vast reaches of space to reach Earth. The god Enki is said to have traveled through the Apsu, the subterranean abyss, to establish his domain, while others like Enlil and Inanna moved through the heavens. This isn't the effortless teleportation of a spirit. It is a difficult voyage requiring specific routes and vehicles, echoing the challenges of interstellar travel. Their need for way stations and their descriptions of the hazards of the journey could be a mythological rendering of the concepts we now understand as gravitational slingshots, orbital mechanics, and the dangers of cosmic radiation and micrometeoroids. The fiery chariots might not be mere fantasy, but a best-effort description of spacecraft vehicles that generated immense heat and light upon atmospheric entry, appearing to ancient observers as a sun moving across the sky under its own power. Their association with specific, powerful celestial objects further deepens this connection. The planet Nibiru, often linked to the Anunnaki in both ancient texts and modern interpretations, is described as a crossing planet, a world with a vast, elongated orbit that brought it into the inner solar system at great intervals. This description is astronomically sound. We know many stars have planets with highly eccentric orbits that would create exactly this kind of periodic visitation. If an advanced civilization originated on a planet within a binary star system orbiting a black hole, or even a neutron star, their entire frame of reference for physics and energy would be fundamentally different from our own. Their divine power could stem from harnessing the immense energies available in such an extreme environment, perhaps even tapping into the rotational energy of an accretion disk or the gravitational potential of a singularity itself. The weapons that could level cities might be descriptions of focused energy beams or kinetic impactors, technologies that would seem like godly wrath to Bronze Age observers. This perspective reframes the entire relationship between the Anunnaki and humanity. The Sumerian king lists, for instance, speak of kings who ruled for tens of thousands of years before the Great Flood. These impossibly long reigns have often been dismissed as pure myth. But if the Anunnaki were visitors from a world with a radically different relationship to time, perhaps due to the time dilation effects of orbiting a massive gravitational source, their lifespans and their perception of time would be vastly extended compared to Earth's inhabitants. What seemed like an eternal reign to humans might have been a standard tour of duty for an Anunnaki administrator. Their gift of astronomy, then, wasn't just a benevolent bestowal of knowledge, it could have been a necessary transfer of information. To manage an outpost on a planet with a different celestial schedule, the local workforce humanity needed to understand the basic cycles of the moon and stars to operate agriculture and logistics effectively. Ultimately, viewing the Anunnaki through this lens doesn't require believing in literal ancient astronauts. Instead, it suggests that the Sumerians were grappling with a profound intuition about the universe. They sensed that the cosmic order was not accidental but engineered, and that the forces governing it were as much about knowledge and technology as they were about raw power. The Anunnaki may represent their personification of the laws of physics themselves, a pantheon of principles like gravity, electromagnetism, and nuclear forces, which truly do govern the fate of stars and planets. Their mythologies provided a narrative framework to explore mind-bending concepts, that life and consciousness could arise under different physical conditions, that time was not absolute, and that the universe was filled with intelligences and energies far beyond human scale. In the Anunnaki, we may be seeing the Sumerian attempt to give a face and a story to the terrifying and magnificent implications of their own astronomical discoveries, a legacy of wonder that continues to challenge and inspire us today. Perhaps one of the most vivid and recurring images in Sumerian celestial accounts is that of the divine whirlwind, a terrifying force described not as a terrestrial storm, but as a cosmic vortex of unimaginable power. These texts speak of a wind that tears the heavens and a spinning storm of the gods, often personified as a weapon wielded by deities like Enlil or Marduk in their great battles. The language used is consistently specific. It is a force that spins, that draws things inward, that pulls even the stars from their fixed positions and grinds mountains into dust. This isn't a simple tornado. It's a description of a fundamental, rotational violence occurring on a scale that defies earthly comparison, a maelstrom that operates by its own set of physical laws, sucking the very cosmos into its relentless spin. When we place these descriptions alongside our modern understanding of black holes, a compelling parallel emerges with one of their most dramatic features, the accretion disk. This is the whirlpool of doomed matter that forms around a black hole's event horizon, a chaotic storm of superheated gas, dust, and plasma that can stretch for millions of miles. Drawn inward by the black hole's irresistible gravity, the material in this disk doesn't fall straight in. Instead, it follows the incredible warping of space-time, spiraling inward at velocities approaching the speed of light. The friction and magnetic forces within this chaotic churn heat the matter to millions of degrees, causing it to glow with intense radiation across the entire spectrum, from visible light to X-rays. To an ancient observer without our scientific vocabulary, this luminous, furious, spinning disk of energy would appear as a literal whirlwind of fire and darkness, a celestial vortex of pure destruction. The Sumerian epic of Lugalbanda provides a stunningly precise account. The hero must cross a terrifying mountain range, and the text describes encountering a wind that could not be turned back, a storm that swallowed the light of day and pulled the very birds from the sky. This goes far beyond a description of a powerful storm. The phrase "could not be turned back" speaks to an inescapable force, a perfect analogy for the gravitational pull inside the innermost stable circular orbit of a black hole, a boundary beyond which no particle can maintain a path that doesn't lead inward. The image of pulling birds from the sky is a powerful metaphor for the way a black hole's gravity can capture and pull in objects from its surroundings, from clouds of gas to entire stars, drawing them into its swirling, destructive embrace. Furthermore, these accounts often emphasize the directional nature of the whirlwind's power. It isn't described as a symmetrical storm cloud, but as a funnel, a narrowing spiral that focuses its destructive energy. This aligns beautifully with the physics of an accretion disk, where matter is not just spinning chaotically, but is organized into a flattened, disk-like structure due to the conservation of angular momentum, the same principle that causes a figure skater to spin faster as they pull their arms in. The Sumerian descriptions capture this funneling effect, this sense of a vast cosmic drain where everything is being organized and compressed as it is pulled toward a single, inevitable point of disappearance. The whirlwind doesn't just destroy, it consumes with a terrifying, systematic efficiency. The mythological role of this whirlwind further deepens the connection. It is never portrayed as a random act of nature, but as a deliberate instrument of the gods, used to enact judgment or restore cosmic order by wiping the slate clean. This mirrors the actual function of a black hole in galactic ecology. While terrifyingly destructive on a local scale, black holes are now understood to play a crucial role in the life cycle of galaxies. The energy released by their accretion disks and jets can regulate star formation, heat interstellar gas, and ultimately shape the evolution of the entire galaxy they reside within. The Sumerian concept of the divine whirlwind as a tool for cosmic renewal, destroying so that something new can be built, is a profound intuitive grasp of a black hole's dual nature as both an agent of annihilation and a necessary architect of cosmic structure. Their whirlwind wasn't just mindless chaos, it was a controlled, albeit terrifying, force of creation through destruction, a concept that finds a powerful echo in the heart of the most extreme objects in the modern universe. The story of the Akkadian Empire's collapse is one of history's great cautionary tales, a sudden and devastating end to the world's first true empire. For generations, it dominated Mesopotamia, but its fall was shockingly rapid. While historians often point to factors like invasion or internal revolt, one of the most chilling accounts of its demise comes not from a list of battles, but from a prophetic text known as the Curse of Akkad. This ancient document describes a series of celestial and environmental catastrophes that shattered the empire from the inside out. And when we examine its descriptions through a modern lens, the parallels to a distant cosmic disaster are nothing short of astonishing. The text opens not with war, but with a profound and terrifying celestial omen. It states that the great god Enlil with his ferocious heart roared, and that, because of the evil they had done, the great agricultural tracts of the city destroyed themselves. This establishes a direct link between a perceived divine wrath and a collapse of the natural world. But the most specific and scientifically intriguing detail follows. The text describes how, for the first time since the cities were built, the great agricultural tracts produced no grain, the inundated tracts produced no fish, the irrigated orchards produced no syrup or wine, the gathered clouds did not rain, the macurum plant did not grow. This is a comprehensive, systemic failure of every single food production system, simultaneously a scenario far beyond a simple drought or poor harvest. This pattern of total ecological collapse aligns disturbingly well with a potential astrophysical trigger. A leading theory for such a rapid, multifaceted disaster is a severe and prolonged climatic cooling event, potentially caused by a volcanic winter or, more relevant to our exploration, a significant atmospheric disruption from a cosmic source. If a gamma-ray burst or a massive surge of cosmic radiation from a relatively nearby stellar event, perhaps even one involving a black hole's jet, had struck Earth's upper atmosphere, it could have triggered a chain reaction. Such an event could shred the ozone layer, allowing harmful ultraviolet radiation to reach the surface and damage plant life. It could also ionize the atmosphere, altering cloud formation patterns and leading to a prolonged period of drought and cooling. The Sumerian scribes, witnessing the sudden death of their entire ecosystem, interpreted it as the gods withholding their bounty, a direct punishment for the king's arrogance. The text then moves from the silent, creeping death of the fields to a period of outright cosmic terror. It describes a darkness that was not of night, stating, "When daylight came, the sun did not shine." This is a critical distinction. They knew what a cloudy day looked like. This was something fundamentally different. The account continues with even more precise language. The moon did not appear, the weather was too foul. This suggests a prolonged period where the sun's light was dimmed to a faint, diffuse glow, and the night sky was utterly blackened, with neither moon nor stars visible. This is the classic signature of a volcanic winter, or more potently, an impact winter, where vast quantities of fine particulates are ejected high into the stratosphere, encircling the globe and blocking sunlight for years. But what could have caused such a global dimming event if not a supervolcano? One compelling possibility lies in the aftermath of a black hole's activity. If a stellar mass black hole in a binary system underwent a period of intense accretion, it could have emitted a powerful jet of radiation. While the jet itself would need to be precisely aligned to affect Earth, the more likely scenario involves a different trigger: the black hole's gravitational influence disrupting a dense cloud of comets in the outer solar system, sending a shower of icy bodies inward. A large cometary impact or a series of impacts on Earth would vaporize rock and ice, lofting immense amounts of dust and soot into the upper atmosphere, creating exactly the kind of long-term, sun-obscuring veil described in the Akkadian text. The scribes interpreted this worldwide twilight as the gods literally turning out the lights. The final blow, as recorded in the curse, was the complete breakdown of social order, culminating in mass starvation and cannibalism. The text states, "He who slept on the roof died on the roof. He who slept in the house had no burial. People were flailing at themselves from hunger." This graphic depiction of societal unraveling is the inevitable human consequence of a years-long famine caused by the climatic catastrophe. With no grain, no fish, and no rain, the intricate economic and religious structures of the empire meant nothing. The great ziggurate stood empty as people desperately searched for any source of food. The centralized authority of the king in Akkad became irrelevant when he could not command the clouds to rain or the sun to shine. When we piece together the entire account from the Curse of Akkad, we are not looking at a simple political history. We are reading a Bronze Age incident report on a global catastrophe. The sequence of events, a celestial omen, followed by a complete failure of all food systems, a prolonged period of sunless days and starless nights, and the subsequent collapse of civilization, forms a perfect cascade of cause and effect that begins in the cosmos. The Sumerian and Akkadian scribes did not have the concepts of atmospheric science or astrophysics, so they recorded the disaster in the only language that could convey its scale and terror, the language of divine wrath. They saw the symptoms of a planet in shock and attributed it to their gods. But by analyzing their meticulous descriptions of those symptoms, we can look past the mythological framework and begin to ask a profound question. Were they unknowingly documenting the distant echo of a black hole's feast, a ripple effect from a cosmic disaster that, thousands of light years away, reached out and touched Earth, extinguishing its first empire? Perhaps the most profound and evocative concept in all of Sumerian cosmology is the idea of a sacred threshold, a literal doorway between the world of humans and the realm of the gods. They didn't just imagine their deities living on distant mountaintops or in the vague expanse of the sky. They believed in specific physical locations where the veil between realms grew thin, where a passageway, a doltu, existed for those with the knowledge or divine right to cross. These weren't merely symbolic gates, they were described as functional apertures in the fabric of reality, points of transition that defied normal geography and linear travel. When we hold these ancient descriptions up against the most radical ideas in modern theoretical physics, a stunning possibility emerges. The Sumerian doorway to heaven could be a mythological precursor to our concept of a wormhole. In Sumerian texts, these gateways are consistently associated with two key characteristics that separate them from ordinary doors. First, they are described as linking two vastly distant points instantaneously. A god could step through a gateway in the city of Eridu and emerge moments later in the celestial abode of Anu, the sky god, a journey that would be impossible by any normal means. Second, and more importantly, these passages were always guarded by terrifying divine sentinels, like the scorpion beings Gilgamesh encountered, because they were understood to be incredibly dangerous. They were not for the unprepared. To pass through was to risk being unmade, to face a transition so profound that one's very essence could be altered. This combination of instant connection and inherent existential risk is the hallmark of a theoretical traversable wormhole. In Einstein's theory of general relativity, a wormhole, or an Einstein-Rosen bridge, is a hypothetical topological feature of spacetime that would create a shortcut between two separate points in the universe. Imagine spacetime as a vast, flat piece of paper. The normal distance between 2 points is a long line drawn across its surface. A wormhole would be like folding that paper so the 2 points touch, and then poking a pencil through to create a tunnel, a dramatically shorter path. For such a structure to be stable and traversable, theoretical models suggest it would require the presence of a form of matter with negative energy density, something exotic that could prop the throat of the wormhole open against the natural force of gravity that would want to crush it shut instantly. This is where the connection to black hole physics becomes electrifying. The most plausible place to find the extreme conditions needed to create or stabilize a wormhole is in the vicinity of a singularity. Some theories even suggest that the singularity at the heart of a black hole might not be a point of infinite density, but could instead be a bridge, a wormhole, to another point in space-time or even another universe entirely. From the outside, it would look and act like a black hole, consuming all that comes near. But theoretically, if one could survive the passage, they might not be crushed into oblivion but instead ejected somewhere else entirely, a concept that transforms a black hole from a cosmic trash compactor into a potential interstellar transit system. Now, listen to how the Sumerians described the experience of approaching one of their divine gateways. It was a place of immense gravitational pull, a point where the normal rules of the world ceased to apply. Those who approached felt drawn by an irresistible force. The journey was described as a bending or a folding of the path, where the destination seemed to rush forward to meet the traveler. Most tellingly, the light around these gateways was said to behave strangely, bending, distorting, and creating impossible reflections, as if space itself was being curved around the aperture. This is a near-perfect description of the gravitational lensing effects we would expect to see around a highly warped region of space-time, precisely the visual signature of a wormhole's mouth. The mythological role of these gateways also aligns with their potential function. They were not used by common people, they were the exclusive highways of the gods, the Anunnaki. This mirrors the theoretical requirement for advanced technology or understanding to utilize a wormhole. Without a way to stabilize it, a natural wormhole would be incredibly unstable and lethal. The Sumerians explained this by saying the gates were protected by divine law and powerful guardians. Furthermore, these doorways were often bidirectional for the gods, but only led to oblivion for humans who dared to approach without permission. This echoes the theoretical idea that while a wormhole might offer a passageway, traveling through it would require surviving conditions of immense tidal forces and radiation that would be fatal without some form of unimaginable protection the Sumerians would have attributed to the divine power of the gods themselves. In the end, the Sumerian doorway to heaven may represent one of humanity's earliest and most intuitive grasps at a concept that still eludes our full scientific understanding today. They perceived, whether through observation, intuition, or received knowledge, that the universe might be connected by a web of shortcuts and tunnels hidden in its most violent and energetic places. Their descriptions move beyond mere fantasy into the realm of prescient speculation. They looked at the cosmos and saw not just an empty void, but a dynamic, structured, and navigable space, filled with both immense danger and incredible possibility, a vision that modern physics is only now beginning to catch up with, using mathematics instead of myth to map the very same incredible pathways. This notion of cosmic doorways and impossible journeys leads us to a haunting and deeply human concern buried within the clay tablets. What happens when the connection is severed? Across numerous Sumerian texts, a recurring and terrifying theme emerges: the silence of the gods. These are not stories of divine anger expressed through thunder and lightning, but something far more unsettling, a complete and utter breakdown in communication. The gods do not shout, they simply stop speaking altogether. Prayers and rituals that once guaranteed a response are met with nothing but an endless, echoing void. This celestial radio silence was interpreted as the ultimate abandonment, a sign that the very structures maintaining cosmic order were failing. for a civilization that saw the universe as a constant conversation between heaven and earth, this silence was the prelude to the end. One of the most poignant examples comes from the Lament for Ur, a heart-wrenching text mourning the destruction of the great city. The scribes describe a desperate city trying to reach its patron deity, the moon god Nanna. They performed all the correct rites, offered the finest sacrifices, and raised their voices in pleading song, but the response was nothing. The text states, "His word was silenced, his word was turned into a hostile word." His call for battle could not be heard. The god's voice, once a guiding force, had been replaced by a terrifying quiet. This wasn't a case of a god being absent or sleeping. It was as if the channel of communication itself had been physically cut, the signal lost somewhere in the vastness between the earthly temple and the celestial abode. The silence was an active, malignant force, more frightening than any roar of displeasure. We can interpret this profound metaphor through the stark physics of a black hole's event horizon. This boundary is the ultimate communication barrier. Imagine an astronaut in a final, desperate act, aiming a laser beam carrying a message back toward a companion ship waiting at a safe distance. As the astronaut crosses the event horizon from their perspective, the message might seem to be sent normally, but from the companion ship's viewpoint, something bizarre happens. The laser's light, fighting against the immense gravitational pull, becomes stretched, its wavelength shifting further and further into the red part of the spectrum. The light dims and the pulses of data slow down, becoming more and more infrequent. The message isn't blocked or jammed. It is progressively diluted and stretched by the warping of space-time itself until the signal becomes indistinguishable from the background noise of the universe. The information is never truly destroyed, but it is rendered permanently irretrievable and incomprehensible to any outside observer. The astronaut hasn't been silenced, their communication has been lost to the extreme physics of the singularity. The Sumerian descriptions of failed divine communication mirror this physical process with uncanny accuracy. They didn't describe the gods as turning away in anger. They described their voices as becoming faint, distorted, and ultimately lost. It was a gradual fading, not an abrupt stop. This suggests an observation of a process, not just an event. If an ancient civilization were somehow linked to or observing a culture or entity that was falling into such a gravitational well, this is precisely how the breakdown would appear. The messages would become delayed, the signals would redshift into unintelligibility, and the connection would fade into an eternal silence, creating the perception that the gods had abandoned their posts, leaving humanity alone in a suddenly vast and indifferent cosmos. This concept extends beyond mere voice to the very flow of information that sustains creation. In Sumerian belief, the Me, the divine decrees that maintained all aspects of reality, were constantly updated and reinforced through ritual and communication. The silence of the gods meant more than just a lack of guidance. It meant the very operating system of the universe was no longer receiving updates. Laws, technologies, and social orders began to decay and falter without this stream of divine information. This aligns with the concept of information loss in black holes, one of the greatest paradoxes in modern physics. The rules of quantum mechanics state that information cannot be destroyed, yet a black hole appears to consume it utterly, erasing the unique history of everything that falls in. The Sumerian fear was that the silence of the gods meant the loss of the cosmic me, the fundamental information of existence, leading to the gradual but inevitable unraveling of all created order back into the primordial chaos from which it came. Perhaps no ancient story resonates more universally than that of the Great Flood, a cataclysm so profound it appears in countless cultures across the globe. The Sumerian version, most famously captured in the Epic of Gilgamesh through the tale of Utnapishtim, is often viewed as a dramatic story of divine punishment and survival. But what if we've been reading it too literally? When we re-examine this foundational myth through the lens of cosmic disaster, the descriptions begin to sound less like a massive rainstorm and more like the terrifying aftermath of an astrophysical event with origins far beyond our atmosphere. The standard interpretation paints a picture of 40 days and nights of rain, rising waters, and a boat saving a select few. Yet the Sumerian accounts themselves are far more ambiguous and cosmically charged. The text known as the Eridu Genesis describes not just rain, but a roaring wind that blackened the horizon, a tempest that passed over the people like a battle. It speaks of a darkness so complete that no one could see another, and a terror that made the very gods cower and retreat to the highest heaven. This language suggests something far more violent and fundamental than a seasonal storm. It evokes a planetary trauma, an event that shook the foundations of the atmosphere itself and filled it with a choking, light-devouring pall. This is where a black hole-related disaster provides a startlingly plausible trigger. Imagine a stellar mass black hole, invisible itself, passing through the outer reaches of our solar system. Its immense gravity would act like a celestial shepherd, disturbing the orbits of countless comets in the Oort cloud, a vast shell of icy bodies far beyond Pluto. This gravitational perturbation could send a swarm of these comets hurtling inward toward the Sun, and on a collision course with Earth. A single large impact would be catastrophic, but a whole shower of them striking over a short period would be an extinction-level event unlike any other. Each impact would vaporize immense quantities of rock and ice, launching it high into the stratosphere and encircling the globe with a thick shroud of dust and aerosols. The effects of such a cometary bombardment perfectly match the Sumerian flood descriptions. The first and most immediate effect would be a profound, unnatural darkness. The particulate matter in the upper atmosphere would block a significant portion of sunlight, creating a perpetual, gloomy twilight where no one could see another, exactly as the texts describe. This wouldn't be a quick storm that passes. It could last for years, a prolonged impact winter that would crash global temperatures and bring photosynthesis to a near standstill. The gods cowering in heaven could be a metaphorical interpretation of the stars and planets being blotted out by this global veil, as the familiar celestial order seemingly vanished from the sky. Next, let's consider the water itself. The myth speaks of the foundations of the earth being torn up and the dikes and canals of the god of the abyss, Enki, being overwhelmed. A massive cometary impact, especially in one of the world's oceans, would generate titanic tsunamis of unbelievable height and power, traveling thousands of miles inland and scouring the landscape. But the flooding might have a more insidious cause as well. The prolonged atmospheric darkness and cooling would disrupt the entire hydrological cycle. While some areas might have experienced torrential, muddy rains of condensation nucleating around all the dust, the primary cause of the flooding was likely the sudden melting of ice caps and glaciers due to the intense heat of the impacts themselves, followed by a rapid refreezing in the global winter that followed. This would have caused a chaotic, rapid rise and fall of sea levels, confusingly described by survivors as the waters advancing and retreating over the land. The Sumerian account of the flood's aftermath is perhaps the most telling detail. When the waters finally recede and Utnapishtim emerges, he performs a sacrifice. The text says the gods, who had been starving without the sustenance of human offerings, gathered like flies around the sweet smell of the roasting meat. This bizarre and vivid image is often taken as a simple metaphor for divine greed, but through an astrophysical lens it takes on a new and chilling meaning. A years-long global winter caused by an impact-induced atmospheric shroud would have caused a catastrophic collapse of the entire food chain. If the gods are a personification of the natural forces and celestial bodies that the Sumerians depended on for agriculture and life, then their starvation makes perfect sense. The sun god couldn't function with his light blocked. The storm god was impotent without a functioning weather cycle. The earth goddess was barren. The entire system of nature itself had broken down and was starving until the atmospheric debris finally settled and the cycle of life could slowly begin again. Viewing the flood myth in this way doesn't diminish its power, it amplifies it. It transforms the story from a localized tale of moral retribution into a global memory of a near-annihilation event, a trauma seared into the collective consciousness of humanity's first civilization. The Sumerians weren't just describing a big storm, they were documenting the symptoms of a planet in shock, using the most powerful language they had to convey the sheer scale of a disaster that had cosmic roots. The black hole in this scenario is the unseen architect, the distant gravitational trigger that set in motion a chain of events that nearly wiped the slate clean. It suggests that the flood was not a punishment but physics, a terrifyingly possible occurrence in a dynamic and sometimes violent universe, an echo of which was preserved for millennia in the world's oldest stories. Today's astrophysics provides us with a language the Sumerians could only dream of, a precise mathematical vocabulary to describe the very phenomena their myths so vividly depicted. We now know that black holes are not just voids but dynamic engines of cosmic violence and creation. And when we hold their modern descriptions against ancient texts, the correlations are nothing short of breathtaking. Let's begin with the most fundamental property, a black hole's event horizon. This is the point of no return, the boundary where the gravitational pull becomes so strong that not even light can escape. To an outside observer, anything crossing this threshold would appear to slow down, its image redshifting and fading until it seems to freeze forever at the edge. Now, recall the fate of the goddess Inanna in her descent into the underworld. She is stripped of her attributes at each of the 7 gates, her identity systematically dismantled until she is a lifeless corpse hung on a hook, a being frozen in a state of death, never quite completing her fall from the perspective of the world above. The parallel is profound. The myth captures both the internal experience of dissolution and the external observation of eternal stasis with an accuracy that feels less like coincidence and more like reportage. Consider next the incredible energy processes surrounding an active black hole. When matter is drawn in, it doesn't vanish quietly. It forms a superheated accretion disk, a swirling maelstrom of plasma where friction and magnetic forces generate intense radiation, including powerful X-rays and gamma rays. From this chaos, relativistic jets can erupt beams of energy and particles shot out from the poles at near light speed, capable of carving through interstellar gas and influencing entire galaxies. The Sumerian descriptions of celestial dragons and devourers suddenly snap into sharp focus. The Mushachek letter 1 E2, Bushachek U, or furious serpent, with its blazing trail and consuming breath, is a near-perfect personification of an active galactic nucleus. Its act of swallowing the fixed stars mirrors how a black hole's gravity can lens background starlight or simply block it from view, making stars seem to vanish. Its roar that scatters the constellations is a stunning metaphor for the way these relativistic jets can clear vast regions of space, their energetic output literally reshaping the cosmic landscape. Perhaps the most compelling correlation lies in the manipulation of time itself. Einstein's theory of general relativity predicts that gravity doesn't just bend space, it warps time. Near a massive object like a black hole, time slows down relative to a distant observer. This effect, called time dilation, means a clock close to a black hole would tick far slower than one out in the galaxy. Now, re-examine Gilgamesh's meeting with Utnapishtim. The immortal challenges the hero to stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights. Gilgamesh fails instantly, falling into a deep sleep. He awakens what feels like moments later, denying he slept at all, only to be shown 7 loaves of bread in successive states of decay, proof that 7 days had passed. This is a narrative embodiment of time dilation. Gilgamesh, having journeyed to the cosmic edge, a place of immense gravitational influence, experiences time at a radically different rate. His subjective moment is an objective week for Utnapishtim, who resides in that distorted realm. The myth captures the subjective strangeness of relativistic effects with a clarity that is almost unnerving. We can even find parallels in the large-scale ecological and atmospheric catastrophes described in texts like The Curse of Akkad. The account details a sudden multi-system collapse, no grain in the fields, no fish in the waters, and a sun that did not shine, creating a prolonged, gloomy twilight. Modern astrophysics tells us that a nearby gamma-ray burst or a shower of comets perturbed by a passing black hole could trigger exactly this scenario. A gamma-ray burst could shred the ozone layer, allowing harmful ultraviolet radiation to damage plant life and disrupt the food chain. Alternatively, cometary impacts would vaporize rock and ice, lofting a global shroud of dust into the stratosphere that blocks sunlight for years, causing a rapid volcanic winter and the collapse of agriculture. The Sumerians interpreted this as divine abandonment, but their meticulous recording of the symptoms, the silent gods, the failed communication, the universal darkness aligns perfectly with the physical aftermath of a cosmic disaster, suggesting they were witnesses to an event whose true cause lay in the depths of space. Finally, the Sumerian concept of cosmic order maintained by the Me and the Tablets of Destiny finds a powerful echo in the laws of physics governing black holes. The god who wore the tablets controlled the movements of the heavens, setting the rates of spin and the paths of the planets. This is precisely what a black hole does through frame dragging within its ergosphere, the region outside the event horizon where its immense spin twists the fabric of spacetime itself, forcing everything within it to rotate along with it. The entity that controls the black hole's parameters, its mass, spin, and charge, literally controls the motion of spacetime in its vicinity. The struggle between the hero god Ninurta and the monstrous Anzu over the stolen tablets mirrors the astrophysical reality that control over the central mass means control over the curvature of spacetime in that region. These are not just wild myths, they are sophisticated attempts to describe a universe governed by immutable physical laws, where the most extreme objects are the ultimate expressions of those laws. The Sumerians, in their own way, were not just storytellers but the first cosmologists, using the language of gods and monsters to map a reality we are only now beginning to measure with our telescopes and equations. Of course, such a radical reinterpretation of ancient texts does not come without its staunch and well-reasoned critics. The mainstream academic community, comprised of archaeologists, philologists, and historians, approaches these astrophysical parallels with deep skepticism, advocating for a more grounded methodology rooted in cultural and linguistic context. Their primary counterargument centers on the principle of Occam's razor, the idea that the simplest explanation requiring the fewest assumptions is usually the correct one. From this perspective, interpreting myths of Tiamat or Inanna's Descent as descriptions of black holes introduces a fantastically complex series of assumptions about ancient knowledge and experience that simply aren't necessary to understand the text. These scholars argue that we are projecting our modern fascinations onto the past, creating a compelling but ultimately misleading narrative. The cornerstone of the skeptical view is a rigorous focus on what the Sumerians themselves said and meant within their own world. Mainstream Assyriologists, the experts who dedicate their lives to deciphering cuneiform, emphasize that these texts were not written as scientific observation logs. They were religious documents written by and for a society that saw the divine in every aspect of the natural world. A devastating flood was not a cometary impact winter, it was the wrath of the god Enlil. The unpredictable movements of planets were not orbital mechanics, they were the decisions of celestial deities. To remove these stories from their religious framework is, in the view of many historians, to strip them of their true meaning and purpose. These myths were tools for understanding human existence, the nature of power, the fear of death, the struggle between order and chaos, not covert textbooks on relativistic physics. A significant portion of the skepticism arises from the inherent challenges of translation we discussed earlier. Proponents of the conventional view point out that the exciting, physics-based interpretations often rely on selecting the most dramatic possible meaning for a cuneiform sign, while ignoring more mundane, well-attested definitions. The word, often translated as a cosmic wind or devouring breath, might, in a different context, simply refer to a particularly bad seasonal storm. The black sun could be a poetic metaphor for a period of profound mourning or societal collapse, not a literal astronomical observation. Historians argue that connecting these dots to form a picture of a black hole requires a selective reading of the texts, privileging rare and exotic interpretations over common and established ones to support a predetermined conclusion. Furthermore, archaeologists point to a complete lack of physical evidence. If the Sumerians had witnessed a nearby celestial event cataclysmic enough to inspire myths of world-ending black holes, we would expect to find some trace of it in the geological record. While there is evidence for local floods and climate shifts, there is no global sediment layer or iridium anomaly from around 4,000 years ago that corresponds to an extinction-level event like a comet shower triggered by a passing black hole. The meticulous records the Sumerians kept of celestial omens, which they took incredibly seriously for divining the gods' will, show no mention of stars vanishing en masse or a new, terrifying vortex in the heavens. The conventional explanation is that the myths are allegorical, explaining very real but terrestrial fears: drought, invasion, disease through a divine lens, not that they are encoded reports of cosmic disasters for which we can find no physical proof. Ultimately, the debate boils down to a fundamental question of methodology. Are we to read these texts as ancient attempts to describe objective, external phenomena using the best language they had available? Or are they profound psychological and philosophical explorations, using the cosmos as a stage to act out human dramas? The mainstream academic answer leans heavily toward the latter. They see the story of Marduk slaying Tiamat not as a description of an accretion disk, but as a political myth justifying the rise of Babylon and its patron god over older Sumerian deities. Inanna's Descent is a powerful exploration of the transition from life to death, from power to powerlessness. Gilgamesh's quest is a timeless meditation on mortality and the search for meaning. To reduce these rich, multifaceted narratives to a single astrophysical interpretation is, for skeptics, to miss their deeper, enduring human truth. They argue that the real wonder of the Sumerian texts is not that they might have known about black holes, but that they so brilliantly captured the universal human condition in stories that continue to resonate thousands of years later. So where does this leave us, if we accept even the possibility that these correlations are more than just imaginative coincidence? We are forced to confront a series of profound and paradigm-shifting questions about the Sumerians and the very origins of human knowledge. The idea that the world's first civilization might have encoded insights into black holes and relativistic physics within their mythology challenges the linear narrative of human progress we've long held dear. It suggests that our journey from primitive societies to advanced technological understanding may not be a straight line, but a complex web with threads we are only beginning to unravel. This isn't about finding alien artifacts or claiming ancient astronauts built the pyramids. It's about re-evaluating the intellectual and observational capabilities of our ancestors and asking if we've underestimated the depth of their connection to the cosmos. One compelling explanation is that the Sumerians possessed powers of observation so acute, so methodical, that they could infer cosmic truths from the silent testimony of the night sky. We know they were master astronomers, tracking planetary motions with a precision that wouldn't be matched for millennia. Perhaps over centuries of unbroken observation, they witnessed a singular, terrifying event, a nearby star going supernova and collapsing into a black hole, or a distant quasar flaring to life in a dazzling display of accretion power. Without the concepts of gravity or physics to explain it, they would have processed this cataclysm through their existing worldview, translating the light curves, the fading stars, and the apparent distortions of space-time into the only language powerful enough to contain it: the epic struggle between the god of order, Marduk, and the dragon of chaos, Tiamat. Their genius wouldn't be in understanding the mathematics, but in crafting a metaphorical narrative so precise that it accidentally preserved the observable effects of these phenomena for thousands of years. A second, more radical possibility is that this knowledge was not developed independently, but was instead received. This doesn't necessitate visitors from other stars, but could point to a lost chapter in human history. What if the Sumerian civilization wasn't the absolute beginning, but rather the first successful reboot? The flood myths present in nearly every ancient culture could be a folk memory of a real, global cataclysm, an asteroid impact or a volcanic winter that shattered a more advanced yet undocumented prehistoric society. The survivors, struggling to preserve their knowledge, would have distilled complex understandings of the cosmos into symbolic stories and myths, the only form of information capable of surviving oral tradition for generations. The Sumerians, emerging from the mud of that post-cataclysmic world, would have been the inheritors and custodians of this faded wisdom, building their ziggurats and writing their epics based on a legacy they themselves only partially understood. This leads us to the most mysterious implication of all: the potential for a different kind of intelligence, one rooted in intuition and symbolic thinking rather than empirical data and equations. We are a culture dominated by left-brain logic, analysis, and reductionism. We break the universe down into its constituent parts to understand it, but many ancient cultures, including the Sumerians, seem to operate from a more holistic, right-brain perspective, perceiving patterns, connections, and metaphors that we often overlook in our relentless drive to quantify. Could they have intuitively grasped the nature of cosmic forces through a form of perception we've since forgotten? Their entire reality was interwoven with the divine. The gods were not separate from nature but were its very essence. This worldview might have allowed them to sense the universe as a living, conscious system, and to understand its violent, creative processes through analogy and myth in a way that feels almost psychic to our modern minds. Their knowledge might not have been scientific, but it could have been no less insightful. Ultimately, the true lesson may not be about proving whether the Sumerians knew about black holes, but about humility. Our modern scientific paradigm is incredibly powerful, but it is also young. It represents one way of knowing the world, a method that has yielded incredible technological fruit. But the sophisticated cosmology of the Sumerians reminds us that it is not the only way. They achieved a different kind of understanding, one that wove together observation, myth, and spirituality into a coherent whole. To dismiss their texts as mere superstition is to make the same mistake early anthropologists made when they dismissed indigenous knowledge about plants and animals as primitive folklore, only to later discover it contained accurate scientific information. The correlations between their myths and our astrophysics invite us to expand our definition of knowledge itself. Perhaps truth is not solely the domain of the laboratory, but can also be found in the poetry of the past, waiting for a future civilization to learn its language and listen to what it has been saying all along. This conversation, spanning thousands of years, matters urgently today because it fundamentally reshapes our perspective on existential risk. For decades, our cultural anxiety about the end of the world has been dominated by terrestrial threats, nuclear war, climate change, a pandemic. These are all dangers of our own making, problems we must solve from within. But the Sumerian texts jolt us into remembering that we exist in a vast and dynamic cosmos that operates on its own timetable, indifferent to human affairs. Their cyclical view of time, where cosmic resets are a natural part of the universe's function, forces us to look up and acknowledge a broader category of threat, astrophysical hazards. A black hole may not be drifting through our solar system, but a gamma ray burst from a distant collapsing star, a nearby supernova, or a large asteroid impact are all statistically inevitable events on a long enough timeline. The Sumerian obsession with celestial order wasn't paranoia. It was a clear-eyed recognition that our survival is intimately tied to the stability of our cosmic neighborhood, a truth we are only now relearning with modern astronomy. This ancient wisdom also offers a powerful critique of the limits of our own scientific paradigm. We are a culture of incredible technical knowledge but often impoverished symbolic intelligence. We can calculate the exact mass of a black hole 20 million light-years away, but we struggle to communicate the profound psychological and philosophical implications of such a discovery to the public. Our data is precise, but our stories are weak. The Sumerians had the inverse problem. Their measurements were rooted in mythology, but their stories were phenomenally powerful, capable of conveying the sheer awe and terror of the cosmos in a way that could be passed down for hundreds of generations. Their approach suggests that to truly prepare for future discoveries, whether it's confirming the existence of wormholes or encountering evidence of other intelligences, we need more than just equations. We need a new mythology, a new set of stories that can help us process and navigate the existential shock of the unknown. The scientific method gives us the how, but it is myth and metaphor that have always given us the why, and more importantly, the what does this mean for us. Furthermore, this bridge between past and future is being built with new tools. The same technology we used to model black hole mergers is now being applied to ancient texts. Researchers are employing sophisticated data analysis and pattern recognition algorithms to scan thousands of cuneiform tablets, searching for recurring celestial descriptors and correlating them with modern astronomical records. A phrase like "the star that ate its brothers" might be cross-referenced with databases of known supernova remnants or binary star systems, looking for a real-world event that could have been observed from Mesopotamia. This isn't fringe speculation. It's an emerging interdisciplinary field where astrophysicists and Assyriologists are sitting at the same table, using the cutting edge of science to interrogate the oldest records we have. We are, in a very real sense, building a translation machine, not just between languages, but between entire ways of knowing the world. Ultimately, the greatest gift of this exploration is a profound sense of humility and connection. Humility, because it suggests that the journey of scientific discovery is not a linear path from ignorance to enlightenment, but a spiral. We are circling back to insights that were once encoded in story, now verifying them with instrumentation, and in the process, recovering a sense of wonder that our cold, hard data sometimes loses. And connection, because it links us directly to the first human beings who ever looked up at the night sky filled with wonder and terror and dared to record what they saw. They were not primitive, they were pioneers of consciousness, the first to try and map the vastness outside onto the ordered world within. By taking their stories seriously, we honor that legacy. We become part of a continuous, multi-millennial project to understand our place in the cosmos, not as its masters, but as its conscious participants, tasked with the awesome responsibility of preserving the light of awareness in a universe that contains, as they so presciently understood, both glorious creation and unimaginable darkness. When we step back and look at the full tapestry of evidence, the correlations between Sumerian mythology and black hole physics form a pattern that is difficult to dismiss as mere coincidence. The most compelling threads are those that describe not just destruction but specific, unique physical processes. The imagery of Tiamat as a swirling, chaotic sea of salt water, whose body is split to form the heavens and the earth, is a breathtakingly accurate metaphor for an accretion disk and the subsequent distribution of matter after a cataclysmic event. The descent of Inanna, with its systematic stripping of identity and the freezing of her form at the moment of death, mirrors both the spaghettification of matter and the external observation of an object freezing at the event horizon. The 7 tablets of destiny which command the motion of the heavens find their echo in the frame-dragging effect of a rotating black hole's ergosphere where space-time itself is forced to move. These are not vague allusions to darkness or power. They are precise, multifaceted descriptions of how these cosmic engines operate, from their consumption of light to their warping of time itself. The enduring, profound mystery at the heart of all this is not what the Sumerians described, but how they could have possibly conceived of it. We are left with a handful of deeply fascinating and perhaps ultimately unknowable possibilities. The first is that they were simply the most brilliant and intuitive observers the world has ever known. Through centuries of unbroken celestial record-keeping, could they have witnessed a singular, nearby astrophysical event? A star collapsing into a black hole, a quasar flaring to life and, lacking our scientific vocabulary, translated its observable effects into a mythological narrative of such stunning accuracy that it accidentally preserved the truth for millennia. Their documented genius for astronomy makes this a compelling, if staggering, possibility. A second, more radical notion is that this knowledge was not developed independently, but was instead received from a source now lost to history. This doesn't require ancient astronauts, but could point to a forgotten chapter in human civilization, a sophisticated culture obliterated by a prehistoric global cataclysm, whose survivors struggled to preserve their understanding of the cosmos in the only form that could survive oral tradition, symbolic myth. The Sumerians, emerging as the first civilization after this reset, may have been the inheritors of this faded wisdom, building their world upon a foundation of cosmic knowledge they themselves only partially understood. Ultimately, the greatest invitation this mystery extends to us is to reconsider the rigid boundary we often draw between mythology and science. We tend to view these as opposites, one a realm of superstitious stories, the other a domain of cold, hard facts. The Sumerian texts suggest this is a false dichotomy. What if myth was never intended to be a literal history of gods and monsters, but was humanity's first and most powerful language for describing the laws of physics? What if these stories are not primitive attempts to explain the world, but rather sophisticated models for understanding it, using narrative and character to explore forces and principles too complex to be articulated any other way at the time? This perspective doesn't ask us to abandon science, but to expand our definition of knowledge. It invites us to listen to these ancient stories not as fairy tales, but as the serious cosmological inquiries they were always meant to be. They challenge us to look at the night sky with the same awe and humility as the Sumerian priest astronomers, understanding that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than we can often express with equations alone. The next great discovery in astrophysics might not only be found in the data from a new telescope, but waiting to be decoded in the world's oldest stories, reminding us that the human drive to understand the cosmos is a story that began not in a laboratory, but in the dawn of civilization itself, under the same stars we gaze upon today.